If you're a construction-focused IT MSP and your best sales opportunities take 6, 12, or even 18 months, the problem may not be your price. It may be your sales process. That's if you have a real one. If your buyer still has a bunch of questions unanswered in their heads that are swimming around in there, that may be causing you your delays. And if your service costs maybe one of these things here, that's a Mini Cooper by the way, or maybe even a Porsche Macan, which is sort of 110k, or if you're talking about supercar level, which is about 350, then maybe it's time to watch the end of this video and take some action. Because they probably won't ask them out loud, but all humans ask these questions before they act. And if they're somehow out of order, it's the exact same thing. And they may not even know they're asking them. But if they're missed, especially in complicated sales like IT MSP business, they're going to notice. And it's going to slow the whole process down. So if you're talking about contracts that cost 5, 6 or 7 figures, then that conversation can stall. And it's going to feel random why people don't then answer. You know, they're going to say, send me some information, or we'll discuss it internally, or we'll circle back to this. It'll be something that they then say instead. Or the reliable old classic, I'm sure you've heard. Let me think about it. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through all 8 questions. And they need to be answered in order. And there's a reason for that, which we'll come to. And I'll show you why an honest salesperson can still look untrustworthy even when one of those answers is missing or not fully answered. So imagine you're talking to James, who owns a growing construction business, got 30 or 40 people or thereabouts. And between all the different things he has to take care of, he's dealing with a shit service. And he has offices and multiple building sites. And he's considering, because of that, to change his IT MSP. Because it's just interrupting his business. It's costing him downtime. And his site teams struggle to access the drawings, which for him is a big deal because there's a big difference if the toilet is somewhere over there and then the plumbing is 20 yards away. Or maybe new employees have to wait for days for the right accounts to be signed off and created. And when something goes wrong, well, James ends up chasing it. And he's getting different answers from different people about the very same issue. Now, he decides to call in an IT MSP salesperson from another company. Let's call him John. Okay? Now, they arrange a meeting, a couple of weeks. They arrive, exchange pleasantries, go into the meeting room, sit down, and John pulls up a PowerPoint slide and starts talking about cybersecurity and monitoring and response times and Microsoft licensing and storage and backups and their incredible tech stack and how great the team is and how long they've been in business and what they've been, you know, what awards they've won and all that great stuff. The only problem with that is that James hasn't even explained how his company works yet. John doesn't know how many sites he runs. John doesn't know how the employees get access to project information. John hasn't even asked James what happens when the systems go down. But somehow, John already knows which package James should buy and what he needs. And of course, James is going to get that Peter Parker spidey sense move in the moment, and he's going to slow down. And something's going to feel off. Even if he loves the presentation. Not because he hates technology or he doesn't like salespeople. My God, he's a business owner himself, runs a successful business in the construction space, and he knows that you have to pitch. Because otherwise you can't win anything. And then you have to, to get there, you have to bring receipts, have valid proof to get that win. And the reason that he's feeling like that is because the recommendation has arrived too early, before the understanding has. And it's the understanding of James's situation. An MSP salesperson, they might be really competent, and the service might be great, and they have a great team, likes all of that. And that salesperson, John, might be really competent and honest, but he's still going to fail because that promise feels too large for the evidence underneath it at that point in time. So that's where trust starts to weaken. And it isn't built by repeatedly saying, you can trust us. We all know that, especially when it comes to successful business deals. And if you are talking about the numbers that we're talking about, which is everything from, like, say, 65k at the low end to 7 figures and multi-millions on the other. And all because you're dodging everybody's reasonable questions or exaggerating something or rushing towards a pitch. So let's go through those questions, because I think you might find this valuable, because it's the order that counts, not just the questions themselves. If you're missing the questions and them getting the answers to them, then you're going to have a really hard time, and you will get 6, 12, 18-month sales cycles. Now, before James assesses your service, he wants to know whether he can understand his kind of business. So is this relevant to him, in his context, in his world? A generic MSP might say something like, how many users do you have? Which is a valid question, I'll give you that. But at that particular point in time, that's a bit tone deaf. It matters, sure, but it doesn't demonstrate understanding. So what you're looking for, if you're a construction-focused MSP, you could ask yourself a few short questions like these. Let's think about this. So how many people work from the office, from home, or remote, and how many are on the active sites, James? How many site teams access the latest drawings, and how they do that, and how often does that go down? Another example might be, what happens when a new subcontractor needs access? What's that look like? Or maybe, what stops when the internet or key system goes down? Those are questions that are relevant to James's life, what he experiences on a day-to-day basis. And now the conversation is on a whole another level. It isn't simply about IT, it's about his business. It's about delayed jobs, inaccessible drawings, employees that are waiting for access to key systems, the site or teams losing work from not being able to access those systems. And James pays for those people whether they do anything or not. That's James's world. A relevant message says one thing. I understand your context and your situation. A premature pitch just puts people off. It means I've already decided what you need, what your benefits would benefit you, what features you need, what services. It's a sales data dump, and it's a disaster. But it happens way too often. So they're not the same thing. And with that, we come to question 2. Does this really matter to me? And in that case, it's James. Does it really matter to him? You might, I don't know, recognize problems, but he might consider those things to be normal. Construction is really complicated, and it gets crazy busy, and it never quite goes the way it should do because of all the moving parts. And it's physical stuff in the real world, with delays and all the rest, and supply chains that could stretch all the way to China. People do occasionally lose access. It's not your normal office space. So he's thinking, does it justify changing an IT MSP? So don't respond with one of those theatrical cyber disaster security story. That is insane. Help James to examine his real consequences, the ones he actually started out with, if he's mentioned that to you. And if not, it's your job to find out. How many people are affected when a system stops working? How long are they unable to work? That's important to James. He doesn't care about IT, he wants to use it. So, do they wait on a call from the office? Or do they find their own workarounds? You know, if something's going wrong and they've got a service, if they're doing that, there's something wrong. You know, for him, for James, it's going to be what happens if they accidentally use an out-of-date drawing and the building gets built differently. So how does that problem, a delay, you know, for a customer or supplier or subcontractor not being there, how does that impact James? If 10 people lose 30 minutes on an IT issue, that isn't an IT issue. It's 5 hours or maybe 10 hours of work that's got lost forever. It's a building site. It's not just a thing that's virtual. It's not all in your head. Now that purpose isn't to frighten James. It's to show him the complete cost of something he may have already started to realise. It's maybe why you're there. And he may be treating that as sort of normal, as giving up. Or maybe he's not just realised how bad it is until they've sat down and asked him. So we now come to question 3. Is it worth trying to solve that thing for me? And that means James. And it's a genuine problem. It isn't automatically a priority. He may be thinking he can get away with this. So James has got recruitment issues, difficult customers, project delays and cash flow to manage. Plus he's got multiple building sites to cover. That gets complex and busy. So why would he give his time, money and effort of his team, which isn't all that big, to change to your service? And that answer has to come from his circumstances, what he's experiencing. Perhaps an unreliable access affecting every site. Could be. Perhaps it's managers having to chase IT all the time when there is, in quotes, what we call a ticket. Maybe James is planning to open up another office, or maybe he's going to be able to pitch for a contract which requires stricter security requirements, something like that. So the size of the recommendation should match the size of his problem that he has. And if the issue is minor, say so. Don't tell him some bullshit. Say you don't need this. And I'm telling you now, that one question I've seen in the past, we got 20 referrals for a 5-figure sum for a delivery for services that were worth 6 and 7 figures, depending on the size of the business. By saying that one sentence, you don't need this. So remember it, because people remember other fair people. And guess what? They'll recommend you to their friends because they think you're just like me. And you'll stick in their memory because there aren't many people like that. So perhaps James doesn't need a major change. Might happen. But that honesty builds trust. And then pretending every loose cable requires a strategic transformation, or one of those words, is just ridiculous. A good MSP salesperson isn't trying to prove that every problem needs their solution. They're just not. They're trying to establish whether this problem deserves you helping James to solve his problem. Nothing else. And with that, we get to question 4. Should I, James, keep paying attention to somebody? I don't know whether you've fallen asleep in sales presentations, but I certainly have. Buyers don't decide to pay attention all at once. They do it in the moment, and they keep making that decision throughout the whole number of conversations you may have. So suppose James says his main concern is site teams keep losing access to drawings. Okay? You need to actually hear that, which means you need to be listening, which means you need to have your mouth shut to do that, because people can't speak and listen at the same time. I'd love to say they do, but we tend not to. And if John, like the previous salesperson we spoke about, spends minutes talking about artificial intelligence, shows them compliance dashboards and different security features, that's going to mean nothing to James. Those things might matter, and James probably knows that because he's an experienced business owner, but right now, in the moment, he's just left James behind. Because he's not talking about James's problem. He's talking about something else, which you offer, your services, your benefits. A better response would be, you mentioned that losing access to the drawings was important to you, and it stops work. So let's stay with that for a moment. And I'd like to understand where those drawings are stored and how the people access them. And then maybe what else happens when that occurs. Now, if you do that, you're doing him a service, but you have to shut up and listen after that. Don't break the silence first. That helps the conversation because James is going to tell you some stuff. You don't need to tell the buyer, in this case James, everything. You need to tell him the things he needs to hear would solve his problem. You need to give them the next step for the next decision, to listen to the next piece of information that makes sense to him. And with that, you get to question 5. Why should I, James, listen to you? And this is about credibility, and it matters, I get it, and people tend to get this really wrong, and I mean, for years I've seen this done wrong, but you should do it this way. You don't need a complete history of the company, or how many people you've got, how long you've been in business, how great you are, what awards you've won. He just needs evidence that to believe that you understand his problem and he has you to solve that for him, and that you've helped other people just like him in his sector, not some random director from another sector that's had a great experience with you. So it's like, we specialize in supporting construction businesses, so we regularly deal with employees moving between offices, homes and active sites. And the real issue usually isn't just the technology, it's making the secure access work so that jobs are not slowed down or work doesn't stop. That's demonstrating something to James. That's relevant. That's credibility. That's really short, right? So try that. Because James probably is already checked out your company, otherwise he wouldn't have let you through the door. Even if it's a sales call and it's just Zoom or something like that. They've already checked you out. They already know. You've been invited in. So you've got a foot through the door, virtually or otherwise. But if it's face to face, definitely. That's a commitment. So if you say it like that, it demonstrates pattern recognition. And you can support it with genuine customer examples that are of people like him, that maybe he knows, that are from his sector, and not to some random director from another sector. Or, if you don't have that, give an example where you've made a mistake and you've learned something in his sector. Every business knows, or every business owner knows, that it's a game of trade-offs. If you say those up front, it makes people want to trust you. But you have to keep it proportionate. Your credibility shouldn't reduce a buyer's uncertainty. And if you spend 20 minutes, like a Netflix documentary, talking about your company, that is not going to help. And with that, we get to question 6. Why now? James could agree to everything you've said and still decide to revisit it next year. And you might be thinking, that's crazy. He has a real problem. So what makes that action now necessary? Perhaps the company is, like we discussed, opening another site, or maybe it's employing more remote people. Perhaps they have a current provider and that's a renewal. They're coming up to be swapped out and he's had enough. Or James is bidding for that contract that we were talking about, where they've got stricter security requirements and compliance, stuff like that. And those are genuine reasons for him to act now. But if the delay doesn't change anything to him that's meaningful, don't manufacture urgency. We are not in a digital world in this case. Remember, this is real people, real companies, real supply chains. James's business is not online. It's in the real world, building real things. So you don't want to be saying dumb stuff like sign up before whatever XYZ date and you can get an incredible opportunity and a discount. Because everybody knows if they look at stuff online that that stuff is available next Monday. So you don't want to be doing that. Not anything even remotely like it. Real urgency explains what delay changes. False urgency merely increases pressure, and business owners have enough of that in their lives. They don't want more. You're there to solve a problem, not create more pressure. And this gets to question 7. Why can't I continue as I am? Because that's a typical human thing to do. Even though he isn't happy and he's looking for something else, changing providers is a pain in the and it means disruption, uncertainty, and effort on his team's part, and probably him as well. All the discussions and the contracts and all the rest of the stuff that has to get signed. It's usually not pretty. So the current service might be frustrating, but it's familiar. You know, as in the devil you know. Now, a poor salesperson is going to attack that existing provider, maybe personally. They're going to say something like, you know. They clearly don't know what you're doing, James. Now, that's a really bad thing to do because he made the decision to hire those people. So imagine how that's going to reflect on you if that happens. A better response would be something where you actually go after the process. So what's changed? Maybe your current provider is technically capable. The difficulty seems to be that their services were designed on offices, normal ones. Your business now depends on people working across several active building sites and in offices and remote, and just has different requirements and requires a different business model. And we can offer you that. Now you've acknowledged what may be working and what may be not working and identifying that issue, where the current arrangement no longer fits. It's the gap between the two. And that you don't need to attack a competitor or them or him. And if you shut up, he might just tell you exactly what he wants to do. And the old belief that he's probably got is, we just need the current provider to respond faster. That belief makes sense because for James, it's a visible problem. Or he's talking to multiple people. That's a visible problem. But a faster response only helps after the disruption's happened, after it's occurred. So what you want to be instilling is the belief you need an IT service that's designed to prevent predictable site problems, not merely respond more quickly when they occur. That, I think, is the shift you need to look at. The problem isn't simply slow support. It's a support model that doesn't work. Not for James. Not how he is now, or how he may be in the near future. Or maybe it doesn't fit even in the construction industry. That's possible. And now James is ready to hear your solution. And that's where it comes to question 8, and the tough one. Because what you want to be offering, James, is only one thing. And it's what you've been talking about, not 10 other different services you've got or different benefits and features. It's the one that fits James's problem and that you've both been talking about. So it must connect directly to what James has told you. So I'll give you an example to make that clear. Let's think about this. We begin by mapping how your office and site teams access the systems they depend upon, what they look like, and then we identify the interruptions that are most likely to stop work. We fix the most important weaknesses and monitor those systems before they become a site-wide issue. And when somebody calls, raises a ticket, needs help, we know your support process that you want that recognises whether it's a routine request or it's something that literally has caused the downing of tools. And it's holding the job up and costing James money. Now James can see how that service connects to his present problem, to the intended result that he wants. You haven't given him a set of 20 features or 15 benefits. You've given him a clear mechanism that can fix his problem. Vague promises ask for some sort of supply of faith. A clear mechanism gives them something that they can evaluate. And most business owners tend to be fairly logical in that space. Okay, so let's recap those 8 questions because this was quite a mouthful. Okay, so here they are. In order, 8 questions. Is this relevant to me? Does it really matter to me? Is it worth solving this? Should I keep paying attention to you? Why should I listen to you? Why now? Very important. Why can't I continue as I am? And finally, what's the solution? And that should not be a 50-deck slide PowerPoint presentation. Because an MSP salesperson can be honest, they can be competent and genuinely helpful and still feel untrustworthy when you spend a few minutes with them. Because they're using those questions in the wrong order or in the wrong place, or they're not fully answering them. And that makes people's guts say, there's something wrong here. And you've got to remember that order. So, here's what I'd like you to do next. Simple action. Take your last 3 sales calls, maybe your next 3 proposals, and walk them through those questions. And mark them up. Take a good look at them. It's an easy enough thing to do if you don't record the calls. Okay, proposals, different matter. If you do record the calls, listen back to them as if you were a construction business owner like James. And mark them up. Every claim that you make before you've earned it. Mark that up. If you make a recommendation, you need to have a reason why behind it. So if that happens before there's understanding how their sites operate or how the business works, mark it up. If you promise a result before establishing what the problem is, mark that up. If you create urgency without an explanation, what the delay is costing him, mark that one up too. Those things are the placeholders that you should be looking for. Those things are the places where trust may be leaking from your sales conversations. Your prospects probably won't identify the missing answers. You may not either. Once you know this, you can't unhear it, and you'll notice them more and more. They'll just end up saying something like, yeah, let me think about it. Send us the proposal. Or we'll circle back to this. Now, if you want the full 8-question checklist, it's linked in the pinned comment for this video. And you can do an audit against your sales calls or your proposals, whatever you want at your own leisure. And I'd be really curious to know if it helps and you uncover a missing question. Can you drop that in the comments? Curious which ones you come up with and how often they happen. And if I'd leave you with one thing that I've seen over the last 15 odd years in the business, is honest salespeople don't need to demand trust. They need to remove the reasons for doubt. I'll leave you with that.